All right, for those of you at home, we were fixing the mic, so here we go.
I'd just like to say that you just made an allegation that I turned the microphone off, and I'm just saying that that's not the case. It is inferior and failed technology. Notwithstanding that, hello everyone. I am happy to introduce you all to my attempt at having a Ward 6 public safety meeting. This is probably the first of these, both in here on the set of wards. And I'm happy to be first, and I'm happy that the police department was more than willing to be accountable to coming. And I am exceedingly happy that the staff took advantage and was cooperative enough to make sure that this was on Zoom. It's one of the things I've been the most impressed with since I started doing this has been how effective the town staff, particularly the multimedia staff, has been in making sure that the ability for people to be a part of these events happens. So they don't get a lot of recognition because they probably don't want it, and you're not supposed to look at them. Otherwise, it's not a good performance. But I just did want to say something to them about that, and I appreciate them making the efforts and making sure this happens. Also, I would love to also thank the recreational department staff for making sure that this space was available to us. I like to come to places early so that I can see the room and whatever, and I'm in an attempt to revert and reverse stereotypes also. That's neither here nor there. And so I come to things early, and I was looking around, and I was really impressed with how active and vibrant it is in here and how available the space is for the community. And it was really wonderful to watch. It's even wonderful to watch the young people who are getting their community service hours and or the younger people who are on staff making themselves available to the people of the neighborhood. I think the last thing I'd like to do is make sure that I am saying hello to two of the people who had this job before me. The first of which is our lovely friend Fred Schultz, who is the person who probably made the previous some of the statements that I'm about to make about accountability in the police force happen. And so they're going to come out in the rest of this preface. But I did want to acknowledge him and his effectiveness at least getting people to pay attention to us over here. I think secondarily, I just had to say how totally and thoroughly impressed I was with the efforts of our previous representative for the ward. I was always like, even having run against her once, I've always just been really impressed with how diligent councilperson Cersei was in making sure that everyone was represented and things that people thought were dragons ended up just being windmills. And she was instrumental in doing a lot of things, even things that people didn't think were possible. So I appreciate her for that. Now she happens to be Mayor Cersei. And she is also in the room for that. And I appreciate your coming. I did want to make that distinction, though, because as a representative of the whole city now, and deservedly so, there are two things that happen. Number one, she runs a wonderful meeting. Since I used to do that side of things for a living, it's really impressive to watch her in the chair. I've seen any number of things, including incompetence, in my own professional experience. So that's a great thing. And I think additionally, it's important to understand that I am completely willing to be available to and amenable to the concerns of the people in this ward, so that the mayor can be properly concerned about the accountability to the rest of the town, in sort of a proper notion of how people are supposed to do government. So thank you for coming, Mayor. I think the third thing is to get to it. We're going to sort of have a format where there are some words from me, and then there's going to be a presentation from the police force. And then because we have sort of an intimate setting in here, it's going to be cool because we have an opportunity to have like a real conversation about stuff. among people who live in Ward 6. And then also people who are maybe busy or maybe in other places will have an opportunity to see kind of a positive conversation about public safety. If there are additional questions related to other places, two things I would say are that we will do our best to get to them. If there are broader policy considerations that are relevant, we'd like to call them out, but that everyone is lucky enough to have a representative in their ward. And so you can have, when you have a police force that is responsive to your needs, you can have one of these in your ward. And so make sure that you ask of your council representatives to make sure that if you have particular questions about particular notions of crime and safety in your area, that you have those conversations in the appropriate place. That being said, again, if you have broader policy considerations or if the police department says something of interest or note in your neighborhood, I welcome you to consider those things, but also try to be respectful of the space and the efforts of the people who are here. I think the third thing is that this is about public safety. And unfortunately, it is not necessarily just about traffic or writing tickets for people who run stop signs. I'm sure that Chief will get to that in the context of talking about how we are envisioning public safety as a town. But there are some other complications, in particular with pedestrian safety, that I am certain that the council is going to at least attempt to address, not the least of which being the realities of cut-through traffic, the control of state highway over major thoroughfares that intersect our ward, and the relative lack of that state policy organization to be responsive to the area vis-a-vis the manner in which they're responsive to other places. I'd like to change that, and that's going to be in large part reflective on and contingent on the people who are in this area to provide some actual heft behind the ramblings of a resident of the ward for 20 years. Because it's not going to necessarily mean the same if it's just one person rattling off either statistics or policy proposals. And as we know, we do have some traditional factors of alienation that are at play in Ward 6 that I think we're probably address tonight and are probably always at play in the way we make policy in the town. So let's not be afraid of those things. We can acknowledge that as we move forward. All those things being said, I guess by way of my introduction, I am Jason Small. I live in Ward 6. So I'm compliant with campaign laws of the town. And I am from Decatur, Illinois, which is in the middle of central Illinois, and therefore full of corn processing, and non-Rust Belt attitudes. So we lost a lot of things. We have a lot of different diversity. There are people who are largely, the population is made up of people who are largely from Brownsville, Tennessee for our African-American population, and then people who were happily agrarian and or involved in corn processing for the rest of the population. So the natural tensions that are afoot in any sort of diverse place were a part of my background and upbringing. I say that to say that it's important for people to know here that we are not under siege, that there may be some issues that we get to that are direct about increases in crime or patterns of crime, or even policy considerations associated with being a border community that has 3 different jurisdictions at play at any given time. That being said, when I came to this area, I started out in Takoma, DC with friends of mine who were all upwardly mobile African Americans, private school kids who were from here, and they lived in this area. When we were starting to look at where I was going to move after I lived in Silver Spring, I wanted to move here because I didn't want to move to DC because I like to be able to vote. Just, I'm a transplant. These kinds of things are important because I was one of those people, like many of you, who thought they were going to come to the nation's capital and participate in the saving of America. I say that to say that when you first get here, if you are not from here, or you have a perception that national politics are at play, as opposed to this being a place where people live, then you'll have these really well-conceived notions of who is doing what, where, and why. And I'd challenge you that the people who live over here, generally speaking, do not have those same sorts of issues because they're self-selecting people who chose to live in purposeful diversity. You can't escape it. The houses are cheaper over here. They're smaller over here. There's $100,000 distinction between the houses that are on this side of New Hampshire Avenue and this one. And that's because of redlining. And so all of these things are at play when people move here. And so one of the things that happens is we have a very intentional population in Ward 6, and we probably have an institutional residential population in some other places. And that's fine. But one of the other things it means is that when people are self-selecting about where they've chosen to be, they have an expectation that it will be respected as what their choices are. And I've always been continually impressed with how open and willing the neighbors are in this area to be cooperative with each other and understand issues of diversity and policing and diversity and perception and all of those kinds of things. We had a bake sale for a year for Black Lives Matter at the same time as my wife was on the police task force of reimagining police. At the same time as I was actually a former police chief for 3 months for a small municipality in Prince George's County. And so it is not as if these issues are not important or that we don't have policy considerations that will take into consideration those things. But I will also say this, and I said this on the campaign trail, the only time in the history of my life as a typecast Black person who has good diction and was an athlete and or high functioning honor society kid who also ran around with reprobates and kids who stole kegs from college kids, and we threw house parties. When House Party the movie came out, we were happy because it reflected our lives. So it's not like I haven't been in the mix. But I say all that to say that I've talked my way out of a great number of places. I've walked past a great number of police men who were doing any number of things. And the only place in the history of my life that I've ever had a policeman pull a gun on me was in front of my own home in Takoma Park. Ironically enough, because I was looking for my cat before I left to go to my honeymoon by a neighbor I'd known for 20 years who's not there anymore. But the point is this, that out of all the places where I can be typecast in the world, when I was here, I was typecast as boogeyman. It is no longer the case that that is true. There are a couple of reasons. Number one, on Fridays when you used to be able to get jacked as soon as it got dark, and you couldn't be on Wildwood or you couldn't be at the corner of Merwood and Wildwood because it was an easy place to quote unquote hit a lick, Fred got in people's faces and demanded accountability from the previous institutional police staff. He was quite successful in doing so, and it was one of the things that changed the way the neighborhood that I lived in happened. I would assume that the similar thing happened across the road. When we started having issues with regard to police and policing and Black lives mattering at all and whatever else was associated with it, we had a dynamic and expert leader in our ward who wrote out for both sides of the issue, not only for the autonomy of Black bodies, but also for the fact that public safety is important and people shouldn't be able to just run up in your house or take your stuff. And it's that kind of balance that I hope that we'll bring to this tonight And it's that kind of thing that I think we should be appreciative of. Um, the final part of this part, I would say, is that anyone who wants to have any issues or conversations with me about public safety, the juxtaposition of working in Prince George's County in an interbeltway community, in municipal government, and what it's like to be here. If you're not watching the meetings, you'll find out there. But if you want to have a conversation with me, I'm happy to do it. The irony is I've always been happy to do it, and I've always been right here. And there are lots of other people who probably feel the same way. It's nice to see Daryl in here. It's nice to see Adam in here and some of the other folks who have made the effort to come across the street in the rain or up the street in the rain. It's not even raining now. I guess the final thing that I would say about that is that before I turn it over to the police department to discuss some of the things that have happened, both in their application of police technologies and or changes in the economy, I just wanted to say what the impetus for all of this was, because one of the first things that happened when the election was over was that people are thankful enough to send me emails about things. And so I was getting emails about issues of catalytic converter theft, the theft of a ladder, a couple of other things, to not talk about anything specific or respect the fact that police are required to be quiet about certain kinds of things because it's their job to be quiet about these kinds of things. You have an innocent until proven guilty matrix for your police. And so the first thing that I did was try to take advantage of the new political capital that I have and do a shock and awe thing and scare Chief Duvall into being talking to me. And I was going to go hard at Chief Duvall and whatever, because I knew of him. I didn't know him because I had friends with other police chiefs, having hired some, and they talked. And so it didn't work because Chief Duvall was cooler than I thought he would be. This is also because my wife is an advocate in these spaces. She works for the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, and she plays no games. And so it's not as if he hasn't been put through his paces by our household. And so I found the chief reasonable about such things and broad-minded enough to accept criticism and to talk about policy, and plain speaking enough to have a normal conversation in African-American vernacular English, and educated enough or well-informed enough, or the dreaded word well-spoken or articulate enough to be able to know polysyllabic words too. And I was like, well, all right, we got a great police chief. And so I would say that when all these things happened and I talked to Chief, he said to me that we have reached out to the community a couple of times, but we have been unable to get a lot of traction with regard to informing the community about changes that we've made or anything else. And I said, well, I just was over there knocking on doors and everything. And I know that there are residents who are very interested in these issues because of their participation on these committees. So let's just ask one of them to talk about these issues. And so myself and Adam and Chief had a conversation about things that we could do to educate people on where we are. And here we are. And so I say all those things to say that that means three things. You have to have representation who is committed to representing your issues, not necessarily the issues of any sort of interest group or anything like that, because we live here. Number two, you have to be willing, if people reach out to you, to be a citizen who's willing to be a part of the community, in which we have. And number three, you have to have a government that's willing to be responsive and communicative with its people. And in primary example, you have to have an outward-facing chief of police who is unafraid to deal with the onslaught of words that could potentially come out of my mouth on any given issue. And so here we are. So without further ado, I would like to turn things over to Chief Duvall and his esteemed force, with the caveat that, the first thing that I did when I got elected was tweet the election final numbers to Chuck D of Public Enemy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Small. The partnership is appreciated. Like Councilmember Small said, when he first got elected, he reached out to me. We met at Mark's Kitchen. Little confusion over the time. He was a day early, but I still showed up. Hey, he's trying to throw me off. But I thank everyone for coming out this evening. I particularly want to thank Adam Brasic, who assisted us in coordinating this meeting. Before we get started, I really want to acknowledge my staff that's here because they're the backbone of this agency. And I'll start in the back of the room. We have Officer Lane, who's the patrol officer. She works the night shift. We also have two people in the back, our detectives, who investigate all of these important, critical crimes we have in the city. And it's Corporal Gluskoff and Sergeant Peterson. We also have our patrol commander, Cindy Williams. Lieutenant Cindy Williams is in the front. And our newly hired captain of operations, Cody Evans, is sitting in the front. We have our newly hired deputy chief, Shabu Philippos, is sitting in the front as well. And in the front up here, we have the famous Ron Hardy, who is our emergency preparedness manager. He's going to be doing the coordination this evening. We also have Misha Rowe, who's our acting crime analyst, who's going to give a presentation this evening. And last but not least, the longest serving member of the Takoma Park Police Department, Captain Richard Sipperley. So this evening, we're just going to give an overview of crime in Ward 6. Everyone knows that traditionally, Ward 6 has had the largest amount of crime in the city. And a lot of that is due to the Takoma Langley Crossroads and some of the businesses, and we'll get into that. There's one business in particular that accounts for over 30% of the crime in this ward. So we're going to talk about that and some of the strategies that we've done there. The thing that I really, really want to stress to people before we get into the nuts and bolts of the presentation is it's critical that you all report crime to us. There have been instances where we've had burglaries or thefts or incidents like that that have not been reported to us. We allocate a lot of our resources. When I say our resources, our response time, whether or not it's our plainclothes team, whether it's our uniform team, based on incidents that occur. So if they're underreported, we can't adequately allocate our resources. So please, please, please take the time to report it to us. We want to know, we want to investigate something that may be someone scavenging through your car and maybe they took some change. We may be able to get some critical video to a robbery that occurred earlier. So all of this has a nexus to us trying to solve crimes. For the sake of time, I'm not going to say a bunch more, but I really want to turn it over to our crime analyst, Misha Rowe, who's going to take a deep dive into specific numbers and specific incidents here in Ward 6. And then we want to open it up to Q&A. The way we're going to do the Q&A is we have people here in the audience. We're going to pass a mic around for anyone that has questions. We're also going to address some questions that were sent to us in advance. And we're also going to go to the chat on Zoom and receive questions that way. Any question that is not answered tonight, we will answer via email. I will answer personally. So if you have something that we don't answer tonight, just follow up via the Ron Hardy and we'll make sure we get you the answer.
I'd also like to say, give me the mic, otherwise people won't hear it. I'm profoundly subjective also, and I am planning to represent for the ward. And so if it seems too out of pocket or whatever, I might not let people answer their question and wait till they have their localized meeting. Sorry.
I should have said that. So when we welcome everyone from all the wards in the city. However, we really want to focus on crime here in Ward 6. I received some questions about a recent incident that occurred in Ward 3 last week. We are planning on having a Ward 3 specific meeting soon. So no disrespect to other wards, a lot of issues in the city are cross-ward issues, cross-border issues, and if we address those tonight, but specifically if it's a specific question about an incident in Ward 3 or Ward 1, you can email me or follow up with me. If it's a Ward 3 question, like I say, we're going to have that meeting hopefully next week where we can address specific concerns for Ward 3. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our crime analyst, Misha Ward, to give a presentation.
Okay, yeah, Misha Rowe is going to give a brief presentation, and then right after that, I'm going to kind of touch base on some of the cases that we've investigated over the last year and kind of let you know the progress of some of the cases. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here and happy to inform everyone on all the stats. So in this presentation, we're going to start big and kind of go small and focus as we go. So we're going to start out with the stats for the whole city and then focus on Ward 6 and how that compares and how much that accounts for the rest of the city as far as crime goes. And then we are also going to highlight kind of the top 5 focus locations or hotspots where the most crime occurs in Ward 6, and as well as focus on burglaries and thefts from auto in particular, as those were specific concerns for this ward. I think we're having a little bit of technical issues, so we're just bear with us for a second.
While we're waiting, for those of you who don't know, we're just trying to get the screen up here in the facility so people that are here can actually see the presentation as well as the people at home. So just give us a moment until we get it up on the screen and we'll get restarted.
I will also say there will be a lot of numbers on the screen, and I will not be saying every single number on the screen. And I will be detailed, but I'm not going to be overly detailed because for the sake of time. And a lot of these visuals indicate the occurrence of crime in a lot of different ways, but it's a lot of the same numbers, if that makes sense.
While we're waiting for the people here and at home, I'm going to make a plug for our community academy. For those of you who are not aware, we're going to have our annual community academy, which is a 12-week program for people to come and understand the nuts and bolts of the police department. You can find information on our website, and it's a great opportunity to get to know what we do. We've had several people in the room actually attend it, and we're hopeful that we have a lot of attendees for this session. I feel like I'm at a baseball game and like a power outage, and we're trying to fill it for TV. So it does have a. Yeah, I might give it to you because you're a talker there, so I'm gonna hand it over to you.
I could do any number of things, including quote some rap lyrics. But all right, excellent.
Okay, so to get started, this chart is a comparison for the entire city of all crimes, and I want to also indicate that we look at specifically what's called Part 1 crimes, and that includes the following: homicide, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larcenies, thefts from autos, and auto thefts. Those are the top 8 crimes that we specifically look at. Other crimes such as like fraud or recovered property and whatnot, that's not something that we're going to look at tonight. So this is just a chart that compares the total number of incidents from 2021 to 2022 and how that has changed, and we'll get into a more specific visual in the next slide of that. So to overview the overall statistics for the entire city, there was a 23.45% increase in crimes from 2021 to 2022 throughout the whole city. There were 580 total Part 1 crimes in 2021, 716 in 2022. The crimes that we saw a decrease in were homicide, rape, robbery, and thefts from auto throughout the whole city from 2021 to 2022. And the crimes in which we saw an increase from 2021 to 2022 were assault, burglary, larceny, and auto theft. So getting more specific into Ward 6, Ward 6 is, as per usual, the majority with the largest amount of crime in the city. This says 43.96, it's actually 43.29%, but it's 43% of crime. And other wards stats are here too, decreases in wards 1, 4, and 5, and increases in wards 2, 3, and 6 compared to 2021. From 2021 to 2022, we saw an increase of 21.57% in Ward 6. And this is just a nice visual that is just showing how much crime in Ward 6 accounts for the total crime in the entire city of Takoma Park. So we got 43% over there. And then going into a little more specifics, specifically Ward 6, in this slide we see in 2021 we had 255 total incidents in Ward 6 and 310 in 2022, indicating a 21.57% increase in Ward 6. And getting a little more specific, and these are the total crimes for the entire city, and showing which crimes saw an increase and which crimes saw a decrease and what percentage of each. And specifically war crime statistics, this is an overview for the entire year of all Part 1 crimes for Ward 6. Clearly the highest number of crimes we saw were accounted for larcenies, specifically shopliftings from the specific Walgreens locations, which we'll get into later on in the presentation. And this is again comparing the crime in Ward 6 to the total amount of crime in the entire city, and by type of crime of each Part 1 crime. And so we'll focus on a few largely repeated or hotspot locations of crime that occur in Ward 6 specifically. So the specific location in Ward 6 that has the highest amount of crime incidents in 2022 was 1329 University Boulevard. That's the Walgreens on University Boulevard. It saw 122 reports or incidents throughout the year of 2022. The second would be the Aldi's on New Hampshire Avenue. That was 30 reports. And the Quality Inn and Hotel Complex was the third highest location of Part 1 crime incidents within 2022 with 28 reports. And then the next two highest reporting locations in Ward 6 were the Hampshire Towers and Takoma Outlook apartment complexes and condominiums. That was 27 and 23 incidents. And then this overviews how many incidences of each type occurred at each of these hotspot locations. Specifically, we'll focus on the Walgreens on University Boulevard. There were 98 larceny incidents that were shoplifting, 4 assaults, 1 auto theft, as well as 1 commercial robbery. That's not listed on there. And then the rest were vandalisms, drug offenses, and arrests that occurred there that were not included in the Part 1 crime classifications. And so to focus on thefts from autos and burglaries, which has been a common occurrence throughout the city and throughout Ward 6 in the past few months, and has been a concern for the community. So the total number of burglary incidences in Ward 6 in 2022, there were 20 burglary incidents. and there were 26 theft from auto incidents in Ward 6. The most burglaries occurred in the month of November in Ward 6, and the most thefts from autos occurred in the month of March. Ward 6 accounted for 22.22% of the burglaries in Takoma Park for 2022, and Ward 6 accounted for 15.47% of the thefts from autos in Takoma Park for 2022. So, and this graph just gives a brief timeline over the year of how the crimes have increased and decreased over the months. This is a map that indicates where the thefts from autos and burglaries in particular occurred in Ward 6, including residential. So the purple house icon indicates residential burglaries. The blue icon indicates commercial burglaries, and the car icon indicates thefts from autos. I do want to indicate that a lot of the commercial burglaries represent some of the shed burglaries that occurred in the community. Because they're a storage unit, that's not specifically the house, we have to officially report them as commercial and not residential. That's just how federal and government reporting work. And so that's what it shows up on the map, but some of those do represent shed burglaries. And this just indicates where they have occurred within Ward 6. And most of these incidences are occurring along New Hampshire Avenue specifically. This graph is it's called a heat map, and it specifies at what time of day and what day during the week most of these incidents occur. And so this chart shows the most likely time, hour, and day that burglaries occurred over the year in 2022 for Ward 6. So most burglary incidents occurred on Mondays around 12 p.m. specifically, but other significant times were Tuesdays and Wednesdays around 3 p.m. and Friday to Saturday around 4 a.m. And this focuses specifically on the days of the week that burglaries in Ward 6 occurred in 2022. The largest number of burglaries occurred on Wednesdays and Fridays in 2022. I think it skipped one. No, there is another heat map, but anyways, there we go. Well, there's one for thefts from autos, so you might have to go 2 more. There we go. Okay, so this is the same thing, but specifically for the crime of thefts from autos from Ward 6 in 2022. Most theft from auto incidents occurred on Saturdays at 4 a.m. and other significant times were Tuesdays from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. And again, focusing on the days of the week for thefts from autos in Ward 6 for 2022, the largest number of theft from auto incidents occurred on Tuesday specifically in 2022. So focusing on the most important location in Ward 6 for as far as when crime incidents occur. So that would be the Walgreens on University Boulevard. This tracks the amount of incidents that happen at Walgreens throughout the entire year of 2022. Yes, for sure.
Okay, also just to let you know, we understood as a police department that Walgreens was a serious issue for Ward 6. And so the first 2 weeks of September, the SAT unit, or plainclothes unit, as well as patrol officers conducted a detail for 2 weeks for 4 hours each day at the Walgreens, trying to address the serious larceny issue at that location. During that 10-week span, they arrested 10 people within that 2-week span. And as you can see, from September, October, and November, there was a very large decrease in thefts. So we kind of sent a message out to the community saying, the police are here, we're not going to tolerate this. Unfortunately, in December, we can start seeing a slight increase. That could be related to the holidays and so forth, but we're still continuing to monitor it. But the police sat and patrol did a great job. And like I said, they arrested 10 people and I think had an impact on that particular business.
Thank you. Yeah. So the police detail started September 1st, 2022. And as he said, there was a significant decrease throughout November and December. So getting a little more into detail about numbers at Walgreens this year, this table indicates the number of incidents that that occurred per month at the Walgreens location. The total number of larceny, specifically shoplifting incidents at the Walgreens at University Boulevard that occurred in 2022 was 123. The month that had the highest number of incidents at this Walgreens was August 2022. The Walgreens at the University Boulevard accounted for 62.12% of the larceny incidents in Ward 6 for 2022. This location also accounted for 38.31% of the larceny incidents in the whole city of Takoma Park for 2022. Did you want to touch briefly on this? Okay, so assaults in 2022, this was also brought up as a concern relatively last minute, so I just wanted to add this slide for people's information. There were 55 assault incidents in 2022, and 28 out of these 55 assault incidents occurred in Ward 6. 35 out of the 55 assault incidents in 2022 were domestically related incidents, and that translates to 63.63%. So the majority of these assault incidents were domestically related. And specifically in Ward 6, 17 out of the 28 assault incidents that occurred in Ward 6 throughout 2022 were domestically related. And I think that concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, we're gonna share the PowerPoint online. We're also gonna share this presentation online. So anyone that wants to see this PowerPoint or also wants to see this presentation, we'll make it available. We'll have our PIO send it out to everyone. I think it's important that people see this. As you can see, I saw the stats for the first time today, and it's not surprising to me that crime has increased in such a high volume. We have been very fortunate over the last 5 years that crime has decreased almost every year. So we're unfortunately back to kind of 2014 levels of crime, which is concerning. You know, like Captain Shipley didn't mention it, but a lot of the burglary incidents are related to two people. We made 2 arrests and closed multiple burglary cases. A recent arrest. Oh, you're gonna touch base? Okay. You want to do that now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Captain Shipley to talk specifically about some of the incidents.
I just wanted to say that as a person who lives in Takoma Park, I think it's important for us all to recognize the amount of technology and effort that is going into trying to parse the data associated with this city. And comparatively speaking, it is a dream that we would have the opportunity to be able to drill down in this way and be proactive in the specific ways that affect specific areas. So I just wanted to make sure everybody recognized that, in addition to the fact that it is awesome living over here and knowing that we don't have a sort of a police force that is imposing justice upon people, but participating with the young people and everyone else who live over there. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you. And if I can just, not to steal your thunder one more time, but as you see the heat maps, I started out by saying we're pleading with people to report crimes. That's how we allocate resources. You can see how detailed those heat maps are. So then we're allowed to, or we are able to allocate resources on those problem times. But if we don't get the accurate number of reports, we're not able to accurately do that. So I'm just going to put that plug in one more time, and I'll turn it over to Captain Shipley to talk specifically about some of the arrests and incidents here in Ward 6 in 2022.
Okay, thank you. as you saw in Ward 6, I believe they listed 3 rapes. The investigative unit were able to identify suspects and make two arrests for 2 rapes. So they were able to close out 2 of those rapes. The other one is under investigation. We also had several commercial armed robberies within Ward 6. One occurred in May 13th. At the Walgreens, the suspect implied he had a gun. Investigators were able to identify a suspect and determined that the same suspect was involved in a couple of other robberies in Virginia. So the investigators applied for a warrant, and the subject was arrested and currently incarcerated. Another commercial armed robbery occurred at the 7-Eleven on Merrimack Drive, where the suspect displayed a gun and took money from the cash register. Investigators were able to identify the suspect and locate the vehicle and arrest him the same day. So they worked very hard, and Patrol did an outstanding job as well. Between May 22nd and June 22nd, we experienced a crime spree of nighttime residential burglaries where the suspects were gaining entry into victims' residence along New Hampshire Avenue, Eastern Avenue, and even up by Montgomery College. The suspects were gaining entry via unlocked door or unlocked window. They would go in, steal miscellaneous property, and then steal car keys, and then steal the victims' cars. This was a collaborated effort between our special assignments team, our SAT officers, patrol, as well as investigators. We all worked very diligently over the 3 months that this was going on. We recovered numerous vehicles that led us to the identity of a suspect. We learned where they were dumping the stolen vehicles that were linked to our burglaries. And on one occasion, we recovered 4 vehicles at the same location connected to our Takoma Park burglaries. So we were able to identify, we actually did a search warrant on the suspect's house, and we retrieved numerous pieces of property linking the suspect to the crimes, as well as recovering a lot of the victim's property. And this person was arrested and charged with multiple burglaries on Albany, Philadelphia, Poplar, Boston, Goody, and 2 on Holly Avenue, and another one was exception cleared out. And this suspect actually pled guilty to all the crimes. So it was a great job by the police department, and they all worked very hard. It was a team effort by everybody within the police department. We also had a commercial robbery on June 29th in the 6900 block, where an ex-employee demanded some property from the manager and forcibly took property from her, and the officers were able to obtain an arrest warrant and charge this person, and also recovered some ammunition as well. During the months of September, October, and November, and December of 2022, we also experienced several other residential burglaries that occurred. Through investigation, the Detective Bureau was able to identify a suspect, and ultimately were able to close out several burglaries, one on Sheridan, one on Larch Avenue, Cedar Avenue, Ethan Allen Avenue, East West Highway, 2 on East West Highway, and Erskine Street, Larch Avenue. And so based on the identifying this person, he is currently incarcerated and charged with all these multiple burglaries that occurred along New Hampshire Avenue, a couple on Maple Avenue, and it affected numerous other wards. So once again, the investigative unit as well as patrol division did a great job putting all this together, identifying the suspect and getting him apprehended. And then during the months of December, we also had a series of shed burglaries. This was a collaborated effort between SAT, patrol officers, and investigators. During one occasion, during these shed burglaries, a suspect description was given by witnesses, and it appeared to be the same physical description. On one occasion, patrol officers got into a foot pursuit with a suspect, but unfortunately he got away. On another occasion, a suspect was identified, the officer recognized who it was, and we obtained an arrest warrant, and the subject was ultimately arrested, but unfortunately he was released that same day. The suspect then began doing shed burglaries again, and the last incident we had with him, we were able to apprehend him, but on this occasion he assaulted a police officer during the course of the apprehension, and he is currently incarcerated without bond. So with the arrest of this person, 2 shed burglaries were actually closed by arrest, and we were exceptionally able to link him, but unfortunately not enough evidence to arrest him for numerous shed burglaries along Glazewood, Elson, Cole, Glenside, Elson Place, Glazewood, Devonshire. I mean, there's at least 15 shed burglaries that this guy is responsible for that we have exceptionally cleared out. And once again, this was a great effort between the patrol officers, SAT, and investigators, and it took a lot of work to apprehend this individual. On December 18th, we also had an attempt murder that occurred in the 7600 block of Maple Avenue. Patrol officer did an outstanding job getting there, identifying who these suspects were, and were able to apprehend them on scene. And investigators did extensive interviews and investigative work, and these subjects are currently incarcerated. 2 people were arrested for that incident. And the one thing that I wanted to point out is we do have a lot of burglaries this year. And the one thing that we notice is that we don't have serial numbers. And that is a major investigative tool that investigators use to track down property that belonged to victims that were taken from them. So I encourage everybody to record serial numbers for any electronics, tools, and other miscellaneous property that you have, because this is an investigative tool that investigators can take to identify your property and recover it, as well as possibly the suspect who committed the crime. So we encourage, and we preach this all the time, is to make sure you record this information and have it locked safe somewhere. So if something does happen, the police have access to this and can learn to identify the suspect. We also do offer a community residential surveys as well as commercial surveys, where an officer will come out to your property and inspect the outside and inside of your property and give safety tips on to better secure your property and give recommendations to hopefully prevent and deter your home from being targeted, from being burglarized. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Captain Shepperly. As you can see, our detectives do a phenomenal job. And once again, it's just based off of the intelligence that you all give us. So before we get into Q&A, Councilmember Small wants to make another comment.
So I just wanted to make sure that we had some context from residents and or people who are not designed to help arrest you in this whole thing about personal awareness and or acknowledgement of what the parameters of some of these things are. If you notice, we're talking about sheds, and we've been talking about catalytic converters. We're talking about those things in the context of a lack of those things in an international scope and with an increase in development all over the place. Those things are fungible. You can sell them at a pawn shop or anything else. With regard to catalytic converters, they're already easy to take and easily can have their what limited serial number information they have on them scraped. They're not usually bolted on very well, and they are an efficient thing to think about if you are making economic crime decisions. If those decisions are rational to you, then you're going to make the most expedient decisions available to you. And also, we do live in a place that has a couple of different jurisdictions. So if you are thinking about the way these things go, I can tell you from being in another place where where there were multiple jurisdictions, it's easy to assume that everyone else has it if you were in a place that has multiple jurisdictions, and then all of a sudden no one is necessarily quote unquote minding the store. And as a result of those things, we have a dynamic and committed police force who has also been committed to being aware of the fact that, at least over here, we have lots of different colored people doing lots of different things, including being young. And so it's important to recognize that you, again, are probably not under siege. Additionally, we do have some organized crime issues. We have fentanyl issues. We have lots of national issues. But if your perspective on these things is centered upon driving a half an hour down to the Capitol or DC, and then shaping policy or ideas or narratives about these issues, and then driving home after the news cycle has changed to evening punditry, then you were missing the fact that we have real lives here. And so please don't assume that things are not happening because you aren't necessarily paying the kind of attention that is more than performative. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So the format we're going to use for the Q&A is we're going to start out with questions here in the audience, and there's a mic in the back that City TV has. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. We'll do a couple in the room, and then we'll go to a couple in the chat. When we do that, City TV, we're going to need the mic up so Ron can read the question. And there's a couple that we received in advance that I will read off, and we will answer them as well. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and we will give the mic to you. Have one. Is that they can't hear that, Mike? I can repeat the question. Doris Duarte from 7401 New Hampshire Avenue. Thank the police department for our responsiveness, but she's additionally asked, since Ward 6 has the predominant amount of crime in the city, are we, the police department, going to allocate more resources to the city? And the answer is absolutely yes. You know, we not only have paid special attention to the facility that we are on, 7401 and 7333, these two buildings with, you know, with active patrols. We've also had our special assignment team, our plainclothes team in here as well. This area, especially Takoma Langley Crossroads, gets special attention. We just bought a bunch of electric bikes that our officers utilize. We have a program called Take 30, where officers are required for 30 minutes every shift to ride or walk in a foot beat. So absolutely, Doris, it's important to us. As I said when we began, we allocate resources based off of incidents, and obviously Ward 6, and a perfect example of that was the Walgreens. You know, that responsiveness to address that was initiated by a patrol officer who was just fed up with having to deal with that. So absolutely, and if there's specific issues that residents have in Ward 6, there's a question that I received online prior to this that addressed a specific issue. We started addressing it before the meeting even started, and we got that about a week ago. And I'll read that one a little bit later. But Doris, absolutely, we're committed to making sure we're putting resources where problems are. As Councilmember Small said earlier, we're not about harassing people for small things. We're about addressing the large things that affect the quality of life of people in our city. And I think what you see is you may have seen a drop in the number of arrests, but what you'll see is quality arrests, like Captain Sipley talked about, for burglary, carjacking, homicide, etc. That's what our detectives are aggressively investigating, and I put them up against any other detectives anywhere, not even in the region, but in the country. So yes, ma'am, we absolutely are committed to providing those services to you. Anyone else? Is it working? Do I need to give this mic, or is it working?
This is working.
Yeah, hi, Cindy DeBella, Ward 2. Thank you. Cindy DeBella, Ward 2, near New Hampshire Avenue and the shed burglaries. So I have two questions. The first is about shed burglaries. So congratulations on recapturing the guy and the other guy. Do you think that's it? Was this a one-off, or do you think people should be prepared for that kind of activity going forward because of the changing crime scene around here? Second question has to do with the domestic violence numbers you showed. But yeah, first question.
I'll address the first question, and I may turn it over to the captain about the domestic violence numbers. I will say this, yeah, that absolutely put a big hit into the number of shed burglaries. And prior to that, we did not have a lot of shed burglaries. But I would never say that just because we make an arrest, it's going to solve something. We still need to be proactive. And part of what we do, we didn't just solve the crime. The investigators just didn't find out who the person was, who was a violent offender, and as Captain Sipley said earlier, fought the police officers when we attempted to arrest him. We also put out information on multiple occasions about what you should do to protect your shed. A lot of these burglaries, the sheds weren't secured. So if you have a $1,000 Trek bike, or it's probably way more than that now, and you have it in your shed, 3,000, I'm getting the signal from Buddy Daniels, you might want to lock your shed. So information like that. So what we also try to do, in addition to the responsiveness of the investigators and the patrol team, is also educational. So to answer your question, I'm hoping, because the numbers have gone down since we made the arrest of this individual, but I would never say that they're going to discontinue. I think the way we prevent them and the way that we eliminate the occurrences is by being proactive and locking your sheds, being diligent, and so on and so forth. And the second question was about the domestic violence numbers. Can you repeat the question just so?
Yeah, the question has to do with how the police handle these situations. So what kind of training do officers have? You have a victim coordinator. How does that all play out? Because maybe I just didn't know this and everybody else did, but I was surprised to see such a high percentage of the assaults being domestic. And I'd like to know what the city does about that.
That's a great question, and I'll answer that specifically. Can you hear me now? So we do have a victim witness coordinator. So obviously when we respond to these domestic violence incidents, all of the victims in these particular cases are referred to our victim witness coordinator, who actually does follow up and does assistance. So that absolutely is something that it's very valuable that we have in the city, because a lot of these victims, it's a perpetual thing. If we don't address it as it happens and don't get them the resources, then they're not their situation is just going to continue. So we haven't really taken a deep dive into the actual numbers. Like I say, these numbers are kind of fresh off the press, so we haven't had a chance to analyze them. I was really shocked to see the increase in the number of assaults, and specifically the number of domestic assaults. But it's something that we take very seriously, and we want to provide those resources to people that are in need. But once again, it is also the educational component. If you are a victim of domestic violence, this is what you should do, and these are the resources that you do have. So we're going to take a deep dive into it. I don't know if the investigators want to say anything more, but Lieutenant Williams is in the front row. If you want to pass the mic to her, it'd probably be easier than me trying to hand it over.
Okay, one of the things that are done on domestic violence calls, if there is a necessity to have a report, it's called a lethality screen. And what the lethality screen does, it's a series of questions asking everything in the range of the fear of the person, if there's guns involved, things like that. Then if you have so many yeses, then the next call goes to the crisis center. And then whether or not they want to participate, but we make that phone call, they talk to them, they have the abused persons program. So on scene, that is all done. So that's a county program that we follow it so that we have those extra safeguards in place for those victims. Unfortunately, we can't make people, follow up after that, but we have that in place for them. So that's one of our protocols.
Do we have any more questions here in the audience?
Hi, my name is Lynette Lander. I live on the opposite side of Lancaster from Councilmember Small. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your excellent work. Congratulations to the newly elected officials in the room. I just wanted to ask, from the department standpoint, what's the most effective way for a resident to know what the outcome is of a call made?
Absolutely. And it depending on the level of the call, if it's something that someone isn't arrested, you can very easily follow up and with the officer and say, look, I want to follow up and let me know what happened with the call. If it is actually an arrest that's made, the state's attorney's office normally keeps in communication with the victims. In the case that we had recently with the multiple burglaries, The state's attorney's office actually sent an email at the end of the case and kept in constant communication. But the email also updated them on the number of years in which the individual was charged. Also, the fact that they were restricted once they were out of jail from having any contact with those victims, as well as being in vicinity of their residence. So I think we are always very open to people asking questions. So it depends on kind of the degree of what the call for service may be. Did you want to add something to? So it depends on kind of the degree, but I think in a lot of times people felt like, okay, I called in for the police department, they responded out, I never heard back anything. So it's important for us. We also have a victim witness coordinator that also responds to victims of crime and makes constant contact. So you hear something. Our detectives, we have the detectives in the room. I don't know if Captain Shipley wants to talk specifically about their protocol, but we talk to crime victims. We don't just leave people hanging if they're victims of crimes. That's really important to us. So I'll turn it over to Councilmember Small to say a quick comment. And if Captain Shipley, the CID commander, wants to make a comment, I'll let him do it as well.
Thank you, Chief. And not to interrupt, but one of the things that I wanted to say, I appreciate the question, Lynette. And there's a distinction that you have to make, and it was one that I had to make when I first started being involved in municipal government, about the necessity of being immediate and touch points with the victims versus communicating to everyone else, and what the distinctions there are. One of the things that I am really impressed with, and one of the reasons why I said the thing about us not being under siege, is that we actually really do have a really effective communication from the blast emails that come out from the press office of the police department. And I know that because we get a lot of them. But if you were thinking that you were under siege, you may see the volume of emails and think, oh my God, there are things happening everywhere. But in reality, they're communicating like every single step along the way in a lot of these cases and providing the resolution. So I would encourage everyone who is interested and is not necessarily full of anxiety and assuming that we live in the Thunderdome Mad Max era, to get on some of those information streams and know about what's going on in the community.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Small. So we put out more information than any other police department. And like Councilmember Small, sometimes it can seem like, oh my God, there's a bunch of stuff happening. But that's because we want people to know. Situational awareness is important. So I don't know if we want to add, I think we pretty much covered that. Ron, since the mic is over there, do we want to go, let's go to some questions on the chat. And if you could just read them off, we will then answer them. So you're gonna have to give Ron the mic. So you're gonna need the mic, Ron, to.
Here's one. Since crime is often not reported, how closely do you believe the reports correspond to the actual occurrences, to crime, and how does the reluctance of a report skew the statistics?
That is a really good question. And for certain offenses, especially thefts, I think they are vastly unreported. Domestic violence incidents, vastly unreported. Now, robberies, homicides, et cetera, I would say they're much more accurate. So to understand, I think when our numbers have increased, I think some of it is actually due to an increase in crime, but some of it is also due to our pleading with residents to accurately report crime so we get more incidents of crime. So I think that has something to do with the numbers as well. But it's really hard to determine. But I guarantee that there are certain offenses. So you walk out to your car, you left your car open, and someone stole, 2 Snickers bars. Are you going to report it? The vast majority of times, no. It's a nuisance. You want to get to work. But if we're doing our heat map, we're not going to show that as an occurrence. Or maybe the person that broke in your car and stole 2 Snickers bars stole someone's catalytic converter a block over, and we're losing valuable videotape. So to answer your question, I wish we had a more defined answer. I don't know if anyone else from the police department wants to say it. It's just, there's no question that crime is underreported, especially the numbers domestic violence and thefts. A lot of times the domestic violence incidents are just simply because the victim can't report it. They do not have access to report it. So once again, giving the victims access to report it is important. So we'll go to one more. We'll go to another one on the chat there. So we're going to need to give Ron the mic. You're going to have to use the mic again, Ron, to read the question. Might want to just hold on to it because we're going to keep on going to you for a few.
We have a new person that lives in the area, and he was wondering the difference in the crime along the Walgreens versus across the street, which would be Prince George's County.
Very good question. We do not have the exact numbers at the facilities across the street. I can tell you this, our community is kind of in a bubble. We are surrounded by Prince George's County that has a lot of crime, and Langley Park and that surrounding area. We're also surrounded by the District of Columbia that has a lot of crime. So comparatively, we have a very safe city compared to the jurisdictions that surround us. And I would like to say that that is attributed to the proactive police department in which we have. So I don't know the exact numbers. I can tell you this, our numbers comparatively, if you look at the number of Part 1 incidents across the city, I think it was 712. That is a very low number overall. Now, obviously, we don't want any crimes to be committed, but we've been fortunate that we have a low occurrence of violent crime in the city. But like I said earlier, I'm concerned about the increase, and we want to do everything we can as a police department to ensure that we get back on track with the lower numbers. But I think I feel fortunate. I grew up here in the city of Takoma Park, and I always felt safe in the city because we had a police department. And I think that definitely has a integral part of why our numbers are lower than adjacent jurisdictions.
This is an excellent opportunity to sort of put you on an authentic point so people will know. So if you have lived here and are from here, and you're talking about Langley Park versus Takoma Park, and we're talking about perceptions and other things, we've also talked about some demographic shifts in that area. We may be talking about what people perceive of as organized gang activity or any number of other things. So with that sense of perspective and sort of acknowledgement that we are dealing with people or with other sorts of jurisdictions where we don't necessarily have formalized partnership agreements and other sorts of things, can you sort of speak to the way people move in the area?
Well, that's a loaded question, but not unexpected. As I said, I grew up here in the city, and you always knew the kind of barriers. If you crossed over into Prince George's County back in the day, there was a different element of policing. I will be honest, that did not exist here in the city. I think that there is. Having grown up here, I know the difference between how you feel if you're in Takoma Park or how you even cross over into Langley Park. You mentioned gang activity. There is a lot of gang activity within a close proximity to where we are. Some of it is in Takoma Park, but the vast majority is in Prince George's County. Councilmember Small mentioned MOUs, memorandums of understanding. We have one with the county police, with Montgomery County Police. We have one with Park Police. We have one with other agencies. We do not have one with the District of Columbia. We do not have one with Prince George's County. Now, I'm less concerned about not having one with Prince George's County because we have law enforcement jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. So for fresh pursuit, we just had an incident, the apprehension of the individual who was involved in the shed burglaries, who fled us and assaulted an officer, was actually arrested in Prince George's County. For certain offenses, we could not cross the line into the District of Columbia because we do not have jurisdiction. So I think that overall, I think we are working much better with our counterparts in Prince George's and the District of Columbia. But a lot of things that happen here also happen there. It's a work in progress, but I think that if I were if I were buying a house here and I could buy it in Takoma Park or right over the line, I would choose Takoma Park because I would feel much safer personally. And that's just speaking from a personal view from a person that grew up in the city. So, all right. Ron, we'll go back to you for another question from the.
Okay. Does the police department consider that crimes within high-rise buildings are the responsibility of the landlord, not the police department?
Crimes within, well, it's the responsibility of both, but we are the primary responding police jurisdiction. So we obviously are going to take police action as we respond, but it's also the responsibility of the individual landlord to make sure that safety measures are put in place. I'll give credit to the Takoma Overlook. They realized that they had a large prevalence of thefts and other issues that were occurring in their jurisdiction. They partnered with us. They had us come out and do a security survey about how they could do improvements. They just didn't take the survey and put it in the trash. They actually did a lot of the important things that we asked them to do. Those improvements, including video surveillance, were very helpful in us solving the double homicide that occurred here a couple years ago. So to answer your question, it's both. But crime fighting is not just the responsibility of the police in general. It's all of us. We expect you all to be our eyes and ears. If you see something, report it. If you're a victim of a crime, report it. So it is a partnership. I will say we are very fortunate that we have very good connection and very good respect and partnerships with our our landlords in our high-rise apartments. So that's a plus for us. So I hope that answered your question.
I'm sorry, and I hate to add to this one as well for everyone, but I do think it's important for us to think about and continue to level set on the premise that everybody is responsible for their own personal safety in an area where there is economic stress and socioeconomic diversity. I would also say, with regard to that, if your vision of these issues is of broader things and the ability to talk about these things at a broader policy level, that is also very true. But the immediate actions of living these lives have practical effect. And here we are. And I'd like to reiterate how proud I am of the residents of Ward 6 vis-a-vis some of the other potential complexities that you could have living in diversity, for being aware and choosing to be here and a part of it. And I think as long as we continue that vein, it's going to be really wonderful. I think having a lot of kids in the neighborhoods again in the second cycle is going to be exciting for the people who are around here. The opportunities associated with that are also really important. And everyone needs to feel like they have a chance to grow up and have a wonderful, safe place to live, because clearly that is happening. My kids feel that way. I'm sure a lot of other people's kids feel that way. And so as long as we're level setting about what it is that we're really doing here, we're all going to benefit from it.
Thank you very much. Before we go to another question, I'm going to read a question that we got. I'm going to go to a question that we got pre-meeting. And it says, which recommendations from the Takoma Park Public Safety Task Force report would be helpful to solve some of the ongoing concerns in Ward 6 or throughout the city? And thirdly, do you think the permanent civilian staff volunteer Public Safety Task Force as recommended should be established? I will say this: I was very open when the Takoma Reimagining Public Safety Task Force was put together. We actually have two of the members that were on the task force here. And I think that a lot of the recommendations have already been acted on, and a lot of those are internal facing, but there are also some external facing recommendations. I think that until we take a holistic approach to what is the cause of crime, and this is more of a long-term solution. Why are people committing crime? Do they have lack of access to education? Do they have lack of access to food securities? All of these things. So when we talked about the holistic approach with public safety, we talked about addressing those needs, and a lot of their recommendations talk specifically about that. Talk about early childhood education. A child develops more in the first 3 years of their life than any other time. Things like that. So until we start taking a look at our developing our young people so they don't commit crime. We talked about, those of you who have been in this area for a while know Marion Barry. One of the best things he did when he was mayor was create a summer youth program. I think one of our city TV members was a member of that summer youth program. That did more to change youth lives than anything else. Because if you have an opportunity, you have a job, you are less likely inclined to go out and commit crime. So we absolutely need to take a holistic view. So we are actively reviewing the public safety task force recommendations. It is a work in progress. So for those of you who are not familiar, we, the police department in the city, and it didn't just involve recommendations for the police department, it involved recommendations for the city and other entities, reviewed it. We did a session with the city council. The city council, the mayor at the time, Mayor Stewart, had a session. Council member, that's a good point. Council member Staldis mentioned that it's still on the website. Now Mayor Searcy is committed to revisiting those task force recommendations. But what I said last night at our meeting last night was, just because we're not meeting and actively talking about it does not mean things are not being done. So I want people to know that. Also, our Chiefs Advisory Board reviewed the recommendations. We have a member of our Chiefs Advisory Board here, I think, that's going to speak next, and former council member Fred Schultz. So I think that a lot of effort was put in to that public safety task force on those recommendations, and a lot of them have been implemented. A lot of them are work in progress, and a lot of them we're still reviewing. But the city is committed to making sure that that was not wasted time, and I already think it's been a win-win for the city. So we'll turn it over to a question here in the audience.
Yeah, I'm Fred Schultz. Two questions, actually, very different. Is this on? Okay. Sort of recently, there has been the experience of preaching up at the corner, the southwest corner of University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue. In prior years, all of that preaching has been on the Prince George's side, and that, of course, meant it was very difficult for us to do anything about it. Having been an author of rewriting the city's noise ordinance, we have the authority to address this when it's being, these people are standing out there, because you can hear it easily a half a mile away, if not further. Yeah. The other question is that on the chart, that the display that was presented earlier, the second area that had the most crime, or the third area, was the Quality Inn and the Red Carpet Inn. And I know from experience that those have been those two motels have been a crime hotspot for many years. Can you address some of that?
To answer the first question, I will say, if you experience the preacher on our side, call us, we will address it. The vast majority of the occurrences have occurred on the Prince George's side. We have worked with a local church. We've worked with other people to try to address it. But if it's occurring in the city, call us, we will address it. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, it's been a little bit more difficult to navigate that when they cross over into Prince George's County, and it's very easy to do that. So I know that the Prince George's County elected officials and the police department is keenly aware, and it has I don't know how sound travels in the crossroads, but you can hear it all the way at your house. So it's a different acoustics. I don't know what it is. Like, there's a pipeline right over to your houses, but it's loud, and I know how irritating it is. But like I say, that's another kind of cross-jurisdictional problem. That like I say, if it occurs in the city, call us, we'll address it. If it's occurring as a repetitive thing, remind us, and we'll try to coordinate with Prince George's County to address it. And the second question was about the motels or hotels on New Hampshire Avenue. I don't know if anyone patrolled or you want to touch on it? Yeah. Captain Shipley is going to touch base on this.
Okay. Yes, we all kind of know that the hotel on New Hampshire Avenue has kind of been an ongoing problem for years. I will let you know that our special assignments team does conduct numerous details up there. They make several drug arrests up there. We, like I said in the presentation, we saw the 2 rape incidents that occurred up there. We do work with Montgomery County as well with their gang unit and their undercover officers as well, and we try to work several details throughout the year to address some of these issues up there on a regular basis to try to lower the amount of crime. And in reality, it seems like based on these statistics, I'd have to look at the previous years, but it kind of almost gives the appearance that it's kind of gone down looking at these numbers compared to previous years, because it used to be a very hot spot there for us, and looking at these numbers, it appears to have decreased considerably.
Why don't you pass it over to Ron, and we'll go back to questions on the Zoom.
Chief, what do you think about opening a substation in Ward 6?
That's a very good question. We are actually considering occupying space at the temporary library site. We've also talked to the resident manager here at the Overlook about possible space here. So it's something that we've considered. Most likely, it will be a temporary spot at the library site here. For those of you who are unaware, the library on Philadelphia Avenue is being redone. So the library site is temporarily moved over here to New Hampshire Avenue. So we'd like to have a presence here. I think it will make a difference. So it's something that we're reviewing, and I'm committed to making sure that if at all possible, we have a substation here. For those of you who are unaware, there's a substation and drop-in station. So a substation is one that officers can go and work there, and we have equipment there. A drop-in station is where officers can go to write reports. We have a drop-in station. It's not necessarily in Ward 6, but it's at New Hampshire, at the 7-Eleven at New Hampshire and East West Highway. And there's also one on Maryback. So you want to go to another question there on the Zoom?
Yes. Are there any formal or informal arrangements among jurisdictions around us to share, coordinate, and cooperate with information?
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on it earlier, and the MOUs, the memorandums of understanding, are more geared towards resource sharing and also jurisdictional abilities. But we absolutely share in real time. I don't know if our crime analyst, Misha, wants to touch on some of the information that she puts out on a daily basis and some of the information that she receives from other jurisdictions.
Yeah, so I receive bulletins from all our surrounding jurisdictions and even further out as well into Northern Virginia and other counties in Maryland, but specifically Montgomery County, Prince George's County. I receive bulletins of significant crimes and investigations that are going on in those jurisdictions. So what happens is every jurisdiction during an investigation, if they are seeking information or sharing vital information that might be affecting other jurisdictions or impacting jurisdictions, they make what's called a bulletin and they send that out. And I receive all of those, and I'm in coordination and communication with the analysts who create those and are on top of the numbers and incidences in those jurisdictions on a daily basis. So I receive those on a daily basis. When I create bulletins on specific incidents in our jurisdictions, I send them out to all our surrounding jurisdictions and jurisdictions further out as well. And that's a daily thing, and I compile all of them at the end of the day, send them out to the patrol for Takoma Park, and so the patrol's aware of everything that is going on in our jurisdiction as well as surrounding jurisdictions on a daily basis and how that changes.
Also part of our investigative unit, our detectives communicate every day with detectives from Montgomery County, Prince George's County, DC, as well as other investigators in the region, sharing information. There's been numerous cases where we have solved cases for other jurisdictions based on communications and information and intelligence that we've developed on suspects. And likewise, we've received information from them. A lot of times we coordinate our investigations together because crimes occur in DC that are related to Takoma Park or Virginia. So we are always communicating with each other on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and it's been very successful. So.
Thank you. We will go to another question on the Zoom.
This one has come up a couple times. Can you please explain the post-arrest process? How can they find out more information about the criminals that are locked up and how they are prosecuted, and also their trial dates, and learn more about their incarceration?
I'm also going to nerd out here a little bit as a person who has a law degree and whatnot. That it's important for us to recognize again the distinction between making sure that you are communicating with the community and making sure that you are allowing for an effective prosecution to occur. And sometimes that means you can't necessarily tell everybody everything all of the time. I know this, but again, from personal experience in a previous job. And I want to make sure that we are at least thinking about the fact that a lot of this information, if it is not general information about how to comport yourself in America, is available either on the website, which is going to be newly revitalized very soon, or that we clearly have a responsive and willing police force to discuss these things. And so I want to make sure that we are thinking about that as we are having these questions answered of us. And in broad strokes, I think I'll return to this theme when we go to the conclusion.
And before I turn it over to Captain Sipperly, we announce all major arrests. Like we put out a community bulletin if we make the arrest for the Shed burglaries and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously, that's not giving information on individual cases, and I'll turn it over to Captain Sipperly so if you want to say a few words.
Okay, just kind of give you a rundown of what happens once the arrest is made. Either the subject is a warrant is obtained for the person and arrested, or the officers or detectives arrest the person on scene. They're taken to CPU, brought before a commissioner, and a commissioner then decides what type of bond that they get, or they could be released on their own personal recognizances. Typically, investigators, once they make the arrest, the state's attorney is assigned to that particular case. The investigators work with that prosecutor to screen the case. The state's attorney may have more things that they want the investigators to do, to go interview some additional people, do some other tasks pertaining to that case to ensure proper prosecution of the case. Then the case is eventually presented to the grand jury for establishing probable cause for indictment purposes. Once that person's indicted, then they most likely will have some type of motions hearing in order to try to suppress evidence, whether it was the interview or some type of evidence that was collected. And then at that point, a trial is scheduled. The way that people can search is you can go on to Maryland case search. Just type in Maryland case search on the website. You can put in the person's name, and it outlines all the history of that court information. So it'll have the trial date scheduled, it'll have the date that they were arrested, and it lists everything that you need. There's also a thing called Vine, I believe it is, where you can actually determine if someone was released from jail. And that's really important, especially with domestic related cases, because a lot of times people are fearful that this person is going to get back out and then something's going to happen, so they can actually monitor this and see when people get out of jail. So that's kind of the basis of what transpires once the arrest is made.
Ron, how many more questions do we have online just to gauge where we are? Because we want to try to wrap it up around 9, but I just want to get an idea of how many we still have. All right, great. I'm gonna turn it over. If there's anyone else in the audience that has any questions, can we give to the gentleman? We haven't heard from the gentleman with the black hat on in the third to the last row.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this presentation also, both everyone. My name is Stephen Tippett. I live on Erskine Street around the corner. Sort of a couple questions, or 2 questions, a little bit different. You can take whichever one sort of is better maybe. First is like about the general home security camera situation, home security system situation in the neighborhood where I live. There's a lot of private residences have those. What's your view on that? Like, what are, generally speaking, I'm just curious about like official view on how those work, effective, not effective, so on and so forth. Second thing has to do with vehicle movement. Now we saw from the statistics a lot of crime occurs in is car related crime, either thefts of the cars or of objects in or attached to the cars. But what's the sort of in terms of the pattern of traffic that you see in Ward 6 particularly, what does that tell you? What does it not tell you? Is it something that's actually interesting from a law enforcement perspective around the crime, overall crime situation?
Those are two really good questions, and so people don't have to hear from me talking all night. Does anyone from the staff want to take those two? Lieutenant Williams will take those two.
In reference to like some of the theft from autos, the stuff that is usually being stolen are little minor, things like change. Just this is my perspective. This is, and it could be the case, but it seems like the common denominator in these cases are some kind of drug abuse, fentanyl, heroin, things like that. I'll give you an example. Last night there was a shoplifting at the Walgreens again, and when the guy went in, this is the comment he made to the clerk. He said, "Sorry, I just need to get high," and he stole a bunch of like laundry detergent and things like that. So that is very indicative of the things that they're stealing from Walgreens, is because they are looking for a quick, fence to get money to get high, and that's just my perspective, and that may be the case. I haven't analyzed that, but again, we go back to the quality of life issues and things like that. But a lot of these that from autos are just people just getting the quick things they need to go get the drugs they want.
Can you touch on the question about the security? You mentioned, you questioned the security cameras and the values of those, and also the transient nature of Ward 6 with New Hampshire Avenue and people cut through Erskine and so on and so forth. So just kind of the value for us of having that video cameras. I don't know if we're going to touch on the community cam program through the county that's still kind of in its infantile stages, but you can just touch on those two things: the value of the community cams as well as the transient nature kind of Ward 6.
With technology nowadays, and it's so inexpensive. People have a lot of doorbell cams, and then they have the lights that, the motion lights that have cams in them, and the quality of the video is actually very good because it is digital. Those are they're pivotal in a lot of our cases because it is so easy it goes on your phone and you can make it a file, and then all you got to do is email it. There's not a lot of, hey, can I meet with you? Can I come get it? Can I get a USB? It's just a quick email. And I think that's a good, convenient thing for people nowadays. As far as the transient, where we are and whatever, I still don't know where this purple line is going. There's so much construction, but it's just so much going on. But that's just gonna, with the, what is that, the bus center or whatever, that has caused a lot of traffic because they now have a transit center right there. And then you just have a lot of foot traffic because everything's convenient. We have a shopping center with everything that people need. So you're just gonna have a lot of foot, just because we're in such a commercial district.
Lieutenant, I wanted to add to that. I was going to say this earlier, but I think that that's important for people to recognize is that we had a little bit of an oasis with regard to everybody else, particularly the other wards, because it's convenient where we live, and we didn't mind being around different kinds of people. But it's convenient for crime and criminals too. It's convenient all the way around. So as long as we're thinking about that, then we can have a realistic perspective on what's happening around.
And also to back that, we have a couple 24-hour businesses. We have the IHOP, we have the Walgreens, then you have the McDonald's across the street in Prince George's County. So it's another reason to be out. It's because, I can go get a cheeseburger, or I can go get whatever I want from Walgreens. If I could touch on Walgreens really quick, and from my perspective, I said, there's no way Walgreens is going to stay here. I said, there's too many thefts. They're losing too much money. But we ended up having a meeting with some executives, their security, and they said absolutely not. It's one of their highest grossing stores in this area, and they will not close as of right now. So Walgreens will stay. So that's one of our things, and they do not confront, and of course not, it's not worth their life for any amount of product. So, but yes, the Walgreens is going to stay. Now they did contract out to, it's a group called Alto. We did lose the prosecutor we had. So Alto is like I guess they hire lawyers and they work with us, and we presented all the information. And one of our constant shoplifters ended up getting 9 months. Another one got a year in jail because of the totality of the amount. And it was more than just theft. It was a theft scheme because there were so many incidents. So they were very pivotal in helping that.
Doris, I think you had another question. Can you take the mic?
Oh, thank you. 2 questions. Because I talked to the residents, I'll tell you why they don't report the crime, okay? One reason is they don't want to get involved. They do not want any percussion coming from the criminal or prospective criminal. They have to go to work. And Doris, you can call, you have your phone, okay? So when I call the police, I call 911, and then it's PG County that picks up the phone, okay? Then they transfer me to y'all, which is not a problem. So I would like, if you don't mind, give the audience and the Zoom residents the correct telephone number, number 1. Number 2, in terms of domestic violence, the partner does not call because the first thing she says, I don't have anywhere to go. And that's my husband. So we need to keep a list and give it to the people that live in the apartments, the property manager, where a resident can go if it's domestic violence, or where a resident can go if they have an alcohol problem. So
Doris, you always come up with really good questions. So first of all, 301-270-1100. 301-270-1100 is a direct line to the Takoma Park Police Department. 301-270-1100. If you want the Takoma Park Police Department directly, and especially if you're in this particular area and it's not an emergency, call that number, because you won't get routed to Prince George's County or the District of Columbia and so on and so forth. So I recommend if it's a theft from auto or something to that effect, call that number. Regarding thefts, there are other mechanisms to report thefts. So if you want to get to work, you can always say, look, I'm going to work. Can you call me back later? Or can you call me at work? Ideally, we want to process the car and we want to come out, but we also want to get it reported. So there are alternatives if you have to go to work or something to that effect. You mentioned domestic violence and the hesitation to report it because you do not have a place to go. There are safe houses throughout the county now. There's one in Rockville in particular that is one of the best things that happened in this county for domestic violence, because it gives victims a place to stay. And yeah, so if I'm a woman or a male or whomever and a victim of domestic violence, and I have 2 children, and I'm being supported by this individual who's my abuser, yeah, I'm going to hesitate to call. That's why having these resources is important. So just my immediate reaction when I saw the numbers, and I saw the number of domestic violence incidences have increased, is for us to be proactive in putting the information out to the public. I think that's critical. Another thing that I think will really help with this is our program for mental health counselors, because they're going to be out in the field and be able to interact directly with some of these victims. And I think that's going to bring out a lot more people that are willing and want to get out of these situations. And we are hopeful that program will be off the ground within the next month or 2. And I can't remember was there an additional question that you had, or did I cover everything? Oh,
The residents want to know. When they call the police department, can't they say, I do not want to tell you what my name is, but even though they say that, you have their telephone number, because when you call, you see their telephone number. We have individuals who want to call, but they don't really want to get involved. They just want to call you so you can come to the apartment building.
Doris, we should hire you, honestly, because your questions are spot on. I will say this. If someone calls us anonymously and they wish to remain anonymous, we are not going to track them down and follow them. We want to know their information. So, for example, if you see somebody being assaulted and you're driving by and I don't want to get involved, but there's someone being assaulted at New Hampshire Avenue, we absolutely want to hear from you. We're not going to cross-check your number and try to, and we ask people to call in, do you wish to be seen by the officer? Because a lot of times if you're complaining on your neighbor about something, you don't want your neighbor to know that you're complaining, so you don't want us to show up at your front door, knock on your front door before we go over to the neighbor's house to address the situation. So I want to assure everyone that's listening, everyone's here, we encourage anonymous complaints. So, we're gonna wrap it up here, and I'm just gonna see if there's any more questions here in the audience before we just wrap it up for the evening, because we're trying to close by 9. And can we get Adam?
So I'll try to be quick here, but Chief, there was a city council meeting last year that I attended where you brought someone from the Maryland State Police to talk about license plate readers, which the city council ultimately funded. And I learned from that Maryland State Police representative that there are actually some very robust safeguards in place for data that's collected from these LPRs, they call them for short, and that you all have to demonstrate a real need to access those records for trying to investigate a crime, for example. To bring that back to my neighbor from Erskine's point about these home security cameras, it seems like that footage is often a piece of the puzzle, but is often not enough. Someone comes in with a car, they get out, they commit a crime. You don't know who that is unless you can tie that to a person, to an address. So given that we have these safeguards in place, I asked the very leading question, are we making as much use of license plate readers as we can to combat, to deter the crimes that are committed with vehicles, which I assume is most of them?
That is a really good question, and we really are advocated for license plate readers, the value of them, especially in the area that we're in. A lot of these individuals that commit crimes over on 13th Avenue in Erskine come in off of Erskine, one way in, one way out. So LPRs can be affixed to vehicles. They also can be stationary. So they are a great crime fighting tool. We have the mayor and 2 council members in the room. We're going to be putting forward a proposal for more license plate readers. We think they are critical. As you said earlier, anybody that wants to go back and watch the session, if they have concerns about privacy, I encourage you to go back and watch that council session. I can put a link to that council session on this video if people would like that, but they are a tremendous tool in crime fighting, and I think that they're extremely valuable. And there's one more tool, crime fighting tool, that I want to address, and that's canine. And we had an incident, the robbery on Woodland, that we did not have a canine available to track and pursue on that violent daytime robbery where people were walking up and down the street. We didn't have that tool, so that's another thing that we may want to revisit. With that, I think Councilmember Small is chomping at the bit because we are getting close to 9.
That being said, I would just like to say, and this is hopefully this will be a good wrap up for this. These are substantive issues of policy and political importance, and they are going on in our neighborhood because they are important to our neighborhood. And as we think about being a municipality, I don't mean to be nerdy and I don't mean to have lofty rhetoric, but I like to think of myself as having been born on a mountaintop because I'm one of those people who was born to civil rights parents, right around the time when all of the assassinations occurred. So there's like all this promise invested in my life. And you don't necessarily get to live those things out if it's just to be a good citizen. But we have an opportunity to be good citizens and be good to each other, to deal with these issues that are the same issues that are roiling the rest of this country. And that we have platitudinous, large talking point, take type things all over the place in America. But we are living and trying to solve these issues, including the fact that I, by rights, have to say that Adam's opinion is just one opinion on this issue, and that there are people who are concerned about personal liberty and the ability to move that have another side to this issue. And the awesome thing is that we actually have a bunch of people who work and live these kinds of issues who happen to live here. And because it's Ward 6, we have a very intentional, forward-moving, forward-thinking professional population to engage in these issues. All those things are great to me because I am a nerd who happened to read a lot of classical political philosophy. And those things are founded in the democracy and the understanding of the city-state as far as it was applied to Greeks, where you can apply it like whatever got from Athens or whatever else. And so if we got to be something, why can't we just go ahead and try and be Athens? You know, we don't have to be Sparta. We don't have to have an oppressive police system. We don't have to be a lot of things, but we have an opportunity to be something more than a bedroom community because we live that reality here every day. Thank you guys all for coming and listening. Thank you, Chief, and the rest of the department for showing up in force in a way that is not forceful. Thank you, everybody else, for coming. Thank you for coming in the rain. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks for giving the mayor a break tonight and not asking her anything or putting her on the spot, because I'm a difficult person to deal with in meetings. Also, this will be posted online. There are innumerable resources on the website, even if it's currently sort of unwieldy. We're addressing that. And don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to go on the community associate or the community policing thing. Don't be afraid to try to get your kids to not be afraid of the police that we currently have. You can tell the difference. And I'd like to say that there are people here who have survived police regimes, let's say. The fact that they're still here is an indication of the kind of person that they are. And we got a real shot to do amazing things here. And I'm looking forward to being a part of it. Thank you.
Just thank you all. Appreciate it.